In Ethiopia, a secret committee orders killings and arrests to crush rebels. All right. It says a secret committee of senior officials in Ethiopia's largest and most populous region, OROMO, which is the land of the Oromo, and we about to see that, has ordered extrajudicial killings and illegal detentions to crush an insurgency there. The Reuters investigation has found, right? So they got people on the ground there, and they said, look, they was trying to cover it up, but we found out that people are getting killed with no court case, just being executed for protesting what they're going through. Reuters interviewed more than 30 federal and local officials, judges, lawyers, and victims of abuses by authorities. Let me make sure everything's still running smooth. Yeah, it appears to be. It appears to be. Praise the Most High for that thing. All right. The agency also reviewed documents drafted by local political and judicial authorities. These interviews and documents for the first time shed light on the workings of the Kori Nigeria, a secret committee in the Oromo language, which began operating in the months after Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed came to power in 2018. The committee's existence has not been previously reported. So the Kori Nigeria is like the secret police. That's the Kori Nigeria, is the secret police used to crush the Oromo people. Now let's look up the Oromo people real quick. Search Google for Oromo, the Oromo people. It says the Oromo are the largest Cushitic ethnic group native to Oromia region of Ethiopia and parts of northern Kenya, right? So it said that they're Cushites. Google says that they're Cushites, but guess what? They're not. All right, and I wish I could find this on YouTube. I was looking for it right before we went live. I watched the video on YouTube not too long ago, but looking for a specific video on YouTube, especially when you don't remember the title, is almost impossible. Just because Google owns YouTube. They like to push like mainstream stuff, and they don't like you seeing things that you actually need to see. But this was actually I forget which channel uploaded it, but it was actually a type of civil rights conference that was being held on national television in the 60s. And you had like one American black man, I believe, maybe two, but you also had like a Nigerian, a South African perhaps, but you had an Ethiopian man there as well. And I forget who all was there, but I remember the Ethiopian there specifically because of what he said, and it came to mind whenever I was reading this article. He specifically said in the 60s that, in Ethiopia we know that there are your Christians, your Muslims, and your Hebrews, the people who still followed the roots from understanding that they were Jews. All right, and then you had people there that were Christians and Muslims and even secular. But the point is, up into the 1960s, you had people remembering who they were. You had Jews, you had Israelites remembering who they were in Ethiopia. All right, and we'll get into the scriptures and show, the people that the Bible does validify that there's going to be Israelites in Ethiopia, just like there's Israelites in every nation. All right. But it says they speak the Oromo language, which is part of the Cushitic branch of the Afro-Asiatic language family. Notice it said Afro-Asiatic. So if they're Cushites, how are they Asiatic? Because Cushites are just Ham. They're just Hamitic. So why are the Hamites being considered Asiatic? It's because they're not. They're not Hamites. They're people who moved there around 2,000 years ago, or over 2,000 years ago. All right. Where did I see that at? Because I seen something that said they've been there for a little over 2,000 years. It wouldn't be Britannica. Perhaps it was Wikipedia that said they've been there for over 2,000 years. No, it was something else. It was something else. But anyway, look, it said that they're Cushites, right? So then why are they in Australia, Canada, Ethiopia, Kenya, Somalia, and Sudan, right? So these people, and not just in small numbers, in thousands, moved to other countries besides Ethiopia. So why is it claimed that they're Cushite? All right, they're not. They're Israelites. And I don't know the word Oromo, what its etymology is. Perhaps it's similar to the Hebrew ram, right? The kindred of Ram, which were Judites. Perhaps. That's just speculation on my part. But anyway, the Korinagenia was formed by the current president, or rather prime minister of Ethiopia, to silence the protest of the Oromo people. All right. The committee's existence has not been previously reported. 5 current and former government officials told Reuters that the committee is at the heart of Abiy's efforts to end a years-old insurgency by the Oromo Liberation Army, which wants self-determination for the Oromo people and greater language and cultural rights. So look, they're trying to stand up for their rights over there. All right. They said, look, Ethiopia is not representing us. Right. That's what the Oromo people are saying. Oromos have long complained of political and social marginalization. When new protests broke out in 2019, the government cracked down hard. The Korinagenia took the lead, the 5 officials said. The violence in Oromia has displaced hundreds of thousands of people. You see that right there? Hundreds of thousands of people affected by them cracking down hard on these people. All right? Ethiopia's government and human rights officials accused the OLA, the Oromo Liberation Army, right? So these are protesters, all right? It says Ethiopia's government accused the OLA of killing scores of civilians since 2019. A charge the group denies, right? And we're actually going to read further down and see what's actually happening. Is it the Oromo people killing all these, or is it the OLA killing all these Oromo people, or is it the Korinagenia? All right, or Korinagenia, excuse me. One of the 5 sources was willing to be identified. Melkissa Gamichu, a former member of the governing Prosperity Party's Central Committee, right? So the Prosperity Party is similar to like the Democratic Party, not in like their actions or whatever, just in name. As far as like when it comes to these political parties, man, the ones that sound the best are always the worst. Like the Democratic People's Party of China, right, is always, they're the ones that's like killing the Uyghurs over there, right? Or genociding the Uyghurs, I should say, sterilizing them, all right? The others, including 2 people who have attended meetings of the Korinagenia, spoke on condition of anonymity, right? So they said, look, we'll give you some info, but we got to remain anonymous, or else this guy might take us out too. That's the prime minister. The people familiar with Korinagenia's activities attributed dozens of killings to the committee's orders and hundreds of arrests. You see that right there? So these killings are being attributed to the Korinagenia as well. Some people say it's the OLA doing it. Some people saying it's the Korinagenia. Among the killings, they said, was a massacre of 14 shepherds in Oromia in 2021 that the government has previously blamed on OLA fighters, right? So the government said, hey, it was them. Don't look at us. It was them. All right. So yeah, that's Abiy. That's Abiy Ahmed in Oromia. Reuters presented its findings to the head of the state-appointed Ethiopian Human Rights Commission, Daniel Bikili. In an interview, Bikili confirmed the existence of the Korinagenia. So the Ethiopian Human Rights Committee, they was like, yeah, the Korinagenia, they try to be secretive, but they really exist. And we see the effects that they do on the people. All right. He said its aim was to address growing security challenges in Oromia, but it overreached its purpose by interfering in the justice system with widespread human rights violations. Right. So this is the Korinagenia, like I said, similar to the secret police. I would say not as sinister as the CIA, but like that's their attempt. That's the state of Ethiopia's attempt to crack down like that. We documented multiple cases of extrajudicial killings, arbitrary detentions, torture, and extortion. You see that right there? Again, like the CIA. Bekele said without elaborating on specific incidents. So I guess it could, be more linked to the FBI just based on the domestic, how they're doing domestic policies. The CIA is more international. All right. Okay, Bekele said without elaborating on specific incidents. He said, okay, this is the type of stuff that they do. He didn't give any specific examples. Ethiopia's federal government, Prime Minister Abiy's office, and the Oromia regional government did not respond to detailed questions for this article. I wonder why. They said, oh, shoot, we've been caught red-handed. Abiy has previously defended his government's human rights record. On February 6, he told Parliament during routine questions, since we think along democratic lines, you see that right there? So again, they got to reference democracy. They are the prosperity party after all. It is hard for us to even arrest anyone, let alone execute them. He said, look, we don't even like arresting people. People do bad things in our country. We're like, shoot, I guess we have to go arrest this guy. Again, this is what playing politics looks like. This is what Putin did in his interview with Tucker Carlson. Hey, we don't do nothing wrong. It's all America's fault. Which, America has done bad things, but that don't mean Russia is exempt. Obviously, just because you may have some extenuating circumstances in Ethiopia, that doesn't mean Abiy's exempt from all the things that he's done with the Kori Nigeria. All right. The unrest in Oromia, home to Ethiopia's capital, Addis Ababa, is a reminder of continuing instability in the Horn of Africa nation. The Horn of Africa is like East Africa. A patchwork of many ethnic groups. Exactly. So you see that right there? People think, oh, all Africans are the same. No, it's not. No, it's not. People think, oh, it's all Cushites in Ethiopia. No, it's not. All right, there's Israelites over there too. It's not so black and white, for lack of a better term. It's mixed ethnic groups all throughout Africa. All right. Ethiopia is scarred by conflict. A 2-year civil war in the northernmost region, Tigray, killed hundreds of thousands of people until a peace deal was struck in November 2022. Right, so they're fresh out of a civil war, and now the Oromo people is like, look, that didn't even address none of our concerns. Things aren't fixed in this country. It's still unstable. All right, and that's what we see. We see seditions among nations. That's what Christ said was going to happen. All right. Fighting erupted last July in another northern region, Amhara, between the Ethiopian army and local militiamen. There, the federal government has imposed a state of emergency. Violence in Oromia has continued even after the federal government and OLA rebels held peace talks for the first time in early 2023. Ethiopia's government has designated the OLA as a terrorist organization, a label that the US and UN have not applied to the group. Because if the US and UN considered any group anywhere a terrorist organization, that means they have to get involved. But nobody really cares about Africa. Nobody wants to get involved, because they don't care. They know that it's a lot of Israelites versus Hamites, and that's as far as they're willing to go. They don't care about who's who. They don't care about defending the righteous. They don't care about doing anything. And I'm not saying that even the Israelites are righteous in this case, or in any case. The reason why Christ has not redeemed us yet is because we're not righteous. All over the world, we're still in sin. All right? But the point is that these people need the gospel. All right? Need the true gospel, to come back to the commandments of God. And up and down this article, again, I wish I could find that video where that man from Ethiopia was explaining how, the people who, in the 60s, the people understood, okay, who is the Israelites and who is, the others, right? They understood that. Who's the Cushites here and who's the Israelites? They understood that in the 60s. All right, but throughout this whole article, you read nothing about that, about people who understand that they're Hebrews. You don't read nothing about that. All right, and we'll see why as we keep reading down. All right. According to the current and former Ethiopian officials, the Kori Nigeria meets in the Oromia regional offices of Abiy's Prosperity Party and is headed by Abiy's former chief of staff, Shemilis Abdisa, the president of Oromia region. Shemilis and other committee members are ethnic Oromo. Fikadu Tisima, leader of the Prosperity Party in Oromia, sits on the committee, as does Ararsa Murdasa, head of security for Oromia, and half a dozen other local political and security officials, the sources said. So they will hire people to turn on their own, group, to turn on their own tribes. And they'll give them a good, nice government salary, a nice job, and pay them to turn on their people. If you ever seen or even looked into any history on like the COINTELPRO movement, that's what they did. Like if you've seen that movie Judas and the Black Messiah, you know how that worked. That was a good movie because it was basically a documentary. Obviously, it has its dramatic moments and its fabrications to build tension or whatever, but it was mostly historically accurate. And what they did was they got some random brother off the streets and said, look, if you infiltrate the Black Panther Party, we will absolve you of all your crimes, and we will you can work with us, you can give us all the information, and we'll give you and when we're done with you, we can set you free, essentially. All right. And then by the time you got to the end of the movie, you realize, oh, this guy's just going to work for them forever because they got him by the balls, essentially. All right. So that's what the case is here. They would take local people and set them up in government positions and say, okay, now it's time to crack down on them. Go and, wipe out your people, essentially. Go crack down on these protesters, start shooting these protesters and the ones who's sparking the movements. All right. And we're about to see that. Ethnic Oromo, Ararsa Murdasa, head of Oromia, half a dozen other local political and security officials, the sources said. None of these people responded to questions from Reuters, right? So Reuters reached out to all these people, and they were like, no comment, all right? Reuters found no evidence that Abiy attended the meetings or that he issued orders to the committee. People familiar with the matter said the committee was formed at Abiy's instigation. Abiy was briefed on at least one occasion in early 2022 about the committee's activities, said a person who was present. Reuters couldn't independently verify this, right? So there's rumors that President Abiy is really running things behind the scene, but he's never physically there. Or he may be there once or twice, but he's hardly ever physically there, but he's pulling the strings behind the scenes, or at least that's the rumors going around. All right. The security committee is little known beyond a tight official circle, right? Nobody knows what's going on there besides the people that's in the in group, so to speak. Reuters found one reference to it in the public record. A paragraph in a 2021 report by the Ethiopian Human Rights Commission about abuses of the justice system. The EHRC report said the committee, known as, please forgive me, Yidi Hinenanity Committee in Ethiopia's official language, Amharic, investigated and jailed people with suspected ties to armed groups instead of allowing the justice system to take its course. You see that right there? So they would just grab people up, throw them in a cell. All right, they didn't care about putting them on trial and just hold them to the cell until they're ready to kill them or whatever. They didn't care about a trial. Jao Maru, the military leader of the OLA, told Reuters in an interview that he is aware of the Kori Najinya's existence and that high-ranking officials of the Oromia are its members. You see that right there? So, excuse me. So the reason why the OLA was even developed in the first place was to protect the Oromo people from the Ethiopian government. That's why it was created in the first place. That's what they're letting you know right here. All right? And that's why the U.S. and the UN, even though they're not always righteous, they're not always doing what they're supposed to do. That's another reason why they can't just say, oh, the OLA is a terrorist group. Because they know, well, if we get into it, then we'll probably even side with the OLA, or we might side with Ethiopia. But either way, these OLA, we know what they're doing. And we know that they're not wrong, even though the U.S. doesn't always side with who's right. But you know what I'm saying? They know it's murky waters. They know that it's a lot of messed up stuff going on that they don't want to get their hands dirty with. All right. He accused the committee of ordering extrajudicial killings, meaning just they kill without trial. That's what extrajudicial killings, arbitrary detentions, harassment, and intimidation without citing specific examples. Again, they're speaking generally without going into the details. Ethiopia has a long history of using a clandestine security apparatus to quell dissent. Ezekiel Gabissa, professor of history and African studies at Kettering University in the United States, told Reuters. During Haile Selassie's 4-decade rule last century, the emperor created a network of spies known colloquially as the Joro Tabi, or listeners, to hunt his opponents. The communist Derg military junta that toppled Selassie in 1974 set up a vast new security system to eliminate threats to the regime. You see that right there? So, Selassie would have been the one ruling when the whole civil rights video that I'm talking about, whenever that Ethiopian was on that panel. So it's not like Selassie was like a righteous man or anything. They worship the people in, especially Benjamin, the people in the Caribbean islands. They really like worship the Rastafarians. They really like worship Haile Selassie. They call him Selassie, right? Haile Selassie the First. They consider him like the Messiah when he obviously was not. He was just a ruler in Ethiopia. But at least he allowed the people to keep their names, their heritage, their culture, because the Hebrews still knew they were Hebrews during his reign. It wasn't until the communists came in where they say everybody got to be atheist, right? And that's the whole thing about communism. Everybody got to be atheist. Everybody got to be secular, at least. If you still got your beliefs, keep that away from politics, right? When the whole Hebrew culture, the whole Israelite culture has to be tied in with everything, or else it does not work. All right, that's the whole thing about the Bible, is that it teaches you how to govern in politics. It teaches you how to do business. It teaches you how to, teach you about the culture of understanding, which is the feast days of God, which is the dress code. It teaches you how to eat, right? It teaches you everything, right? So the only way that a real Hebrew can be a Hebrew is if you keep all of that. But when the communists came in, it was like, no, the political world got to be secular, all right? Set up a vast new security system to eliminate threats to the regime. You see that right there? At the turn of the century, Ethiopia got a new constitution and parliament, so that'll be around the 2000s. But this government, too, led by Meles Zenawi, grew increasingly repressive and fashioned a top-down structure of surveillance that extended. Oh, come on now. I didn't click on that link. Y'all quit messing with me. There we go. That extended to every level of society. The system was commonly known as Amist La'and, 1 to 5, because spies were typically assigned 5 people to monitor. Excuse me. That's like your NSA. All right. A little bit probably not as advanced as your NSA with the cameras and stuff that we all have on us at all times. It was probably a little bit less advanced than that, but same difference about studying the population. Abiy became prime minister in 2018. According to the current and former government officials, the Kori Nigeria Security Committee was formed soon afterwards in response to youth protests in Oromia over inequality and economic mismanagement. Does that sound familiar? That's the same type of thing that Black Lives Matter was protesting about. It was protesting about inequality and economic mismanagement. All right, saying defund the police and all that. All right, and of course we know that was Israelites here in America. Same thing with the Israelites in Ethiopia, man. As you study like world events, you start to notice patterns. All right, the oppressed in each country is going through similar things. All right, and it's usually black and brown people. All right. It's mostly Israelites that's being oppressed. When you look through the curses of Deuteronomy 28, and we'll get some of that here in a minute, and the plagues in Leviticus 26, for example, you start to see a pattern of the oppressed people around the world is mostly Israelites, all right, because they're under the curses. And a lot of these people don't really consider themselves ethnically different from the people that's oppressing them. But guess what? They are, though. And in a lot of cases, the people who are oppressing them know that there is a difference. All right, just like in India and the untouchables. All right, In India, I ain't going to go into it too deep, maybe at some other point. In India, they have a particular structure, a particular caste system is what they call it, C-A-S-T-E, where certain peoples are called untouchables, and they don't do anything with those peoples, even though they look like the people that's in India. They said, we don't mess with y'all, because they know that there's a difference. All right? But anyway, back to the situation in Ethiopia. Milkesa Gemechu, the former member of the Prosperity Party's Central Committee, said he first heard of the Koinagenya at a meeting of OROMO political leaders in March 2019, right? So for years they've had this now, basically since Abiy came into office. There, Shemelis, a newly appointed as president of Oromia, announced that the Koinagenya would direct operations against enemy elements and enemy cells. You see that right there. So, again, this is like your black cops or your black COINTELPRO FBI agents. All right. Shemelis and Abiy's office didn't respond to questions about the Koinagenya. Reuters couldn't independently verify Milkesa's account of the meeting. Milkesa now lives in the U.S. He says he left Ethiopia after receiving threats from security officials for criticizing Abiy and the Prosperity Party, including over their handling of unrest in Oromia. See, a lot of people take it for granted that we can pretty much say what we want in America, and they're trying to take that away now. But the point is, you can't really say whatever you want in some of these other countries. They will either jail you or they will put you to death. In some cases, both. All right, jail you until they feel like they can put you to death without civil unrest. All right. From late 2019, the Koinagenya met in the Prosperity Party's Oromia regional headquarters in downtown Addis Ababa as often as 3 times a week, said the 2 officials who participated in some of the meetings. The building was emptied of other staff. Attendees handed in their phones, and documents were collected at the end of each session, these people said. Right? So they're trying to keep it under wraps, trying to keep it very secretive. Abiy's father is Oromo, and he owes his premiership in part to youth-led protests in Oromia that forced his predecessor, Hailemariam Desalegn, to resign, right? So Abiy, the whole Ahmed Abiy situation, he's like one of your civil rights leaders who ended up taking a job with whether it be government or media or whatever the case may be. He's somebody who they give a job to so that he would do evil things and partake in evil. So that's what he ended up doing. As you can see here, Abiy is of the same lineage as these Oromo people that he's trying to squash, trying to oppress. All right. It says So his protest caused his predecessor to resign. Nevertheless, unrest in the region quickly loomed as a major challenge for the new prime minister. All right, let's make sure that we're going. Yeah, it appears that we're back. Hey, devil, I know you're still watching. Get on out of here, unless you want to get blasted again. All right. Ever since Emperor Menelik II's campaign of conquest at the close of the 19th century imposed Amhara culture and language on assimilated groups, Oromos have complained of political and social marginalization. All right, so the Oromos have always spoke against what the Cushite culture being pushed upon them because they're not Cushites. You understand? They're Israelites. All right, so I'm gonna finish this out. It says Oromos hoped their lot would improve with Abiy, but many became disenchanted when change didn't materialize. Doesn't that sound familiar? Like the Americans thought change would come with Obama, because Obama was always talking about change, and he was talking about how he was going to change the system, but that's not what happened. Talking about how he was going to uplift black people, that's not what happened though. The American agenda just continued under Obama, the same way the Ethiopian agenda just continued under Ahmed Abiy. All right. New protests broke out in October 2019, and the Koinagenya cracked down. Right. So this is even before the Black Lives Matter movement in America. But again, it's very similar. All right. Only difference is that they crack down harder than the police here in America. That's the only difference. All right. And this goes into, I'm not going to get into this, but this goes into how the Koine-Nijinya was killing tribesmen. All right. Just tribesmen who were just going about their day. Right. That's the type of stuff that they do. If they think you look like you've been to a protest or are going to a protest, then they just, take you and either arrest you for no reason or sometimes even kill you. All right, beat you up, like do whatever. All right. So let's get into the scriptures. Let's prove that it is Israelites in Ethiopia. Because some people may say, oh, there ain't no Israelites in Africa. There's no Jews in Africa. You just don't know the Bible. You just don't know the Bible. First of all, it's Jews in every nation. And we'll get into that here in a minute. But let's go specifically talking about Ethiopia. Let's go to Zephaniah. And I brought this out when dealing with African countries before. I brought this out. But just in case y'all don't know, Zephaniah 2 lets you know. And Zephaniah 2 and verse, it's 3, excuse me. Zephaniah 3 and verse, I think either 8 or 10. Zephaniah 3, no, it's 10. Zephaniah 3 and verse 10. It says, from beyond the rivers of Ethiopia, my suppliants, even the daughter of my dispersed, shall bring my offering. All right, so it says beyond the rivers of Ethiopia, it means Ethiopia and beyond. All right, so when talking about the Congo, that's beyond the rivers of Ethiopia. When talking about like West Africa, that's beyond the rivers of Ethiopia as well. But to go beyond Ethiopia, you first have to go through Ethiopia. All right, at least if you're headed from Israel, if you're headed from Judea. All right. It says, from beyond the rivers of Ethiopia, my suppliants, even the daughter of my dispersed shall bring mine offering. Meaning there's dispersed Israelites in that region. All right. So let's go to Isaiah, because Isaiah talked about the same thing. All right. In Isaiah 11. Now Isaiah is heavy because it talks about Israelites everywhere. All right. It don't just talk about Africa. It talks about everywhere. All right. Isaiah 11, I'll start with verse 10. And in that day, there shall be a root of Jesse, which shall stand for an ensign of the people. All right. So there's going to be somebody who comes from the lineage of Jesse. Jesse was a Judite from Judah. It's talking about Christ. To it, meaning that root, shall the Gentiles seek. Gentiles just means nations. People get tripped up over the word Gentiles. It just means nations. All right. And his rest shall be glorious, meaning there will be peace. There will be peace eventually. All right. And it shall come to pass in that day that the Lord shall set his hand again the second time to recover the remnant of his people. All right. So the first time he did it when we come up out of Egypt. All right. He said he's going to recover his people the second time, which shall be left from Assyria. So Assyria is like modern day Syria and Iraq. All right, so that's what Assyria is. And from Egypt. Egypt is in Africa. And from Pathros. Pathros is like modern day Sudan. And from Cush. Cush is Ethiopia. So there's going to be Israelites coming from Ethiopia, man. It's not that hard. And from Elam, that's Persia or Iran today. And from Shinar, that's Kuwait. And from Hamath, Hamath is Syria. All right. And from the islands of the sea. So islands of the sea can be anything from the Mediterranean islands, the Caribbean islands, the Pacific islands. All right. The islands of the sea are all over the world. Right, so we see here specifically it highlights Africa and the Middle East as places where Israelites are going to come from. All right, let's see, because he said, recover the remnant of his people. Verse 12, he shall set up an ensign for the nations, and shall assemble the outcast of Israel, and gather together the dispersed of Judah from the four corners of the earth. Judah is where you get the term Jew from. So when people talk about Ethiopian Jews, there may have been some that converted, but a lot of them are actually from Judah. All right, descendants of the man Judah. All right, and again, let's keep going. Let's keep going. In Acts 2 and verse 5. Let's go to Acts chapter 2 and verse 5. And there were dwelling at Jerusalem Jews, devout men out of every nation under heaven. You see that right there? So it said there were Jews at the feast in Jerusalem, at the Pentecost feast in Jerusalem, out of every nation. All right, even at Christ's time, Jews were already in every nation. All right. All right, so it doesn't speak of Ethiopia right here, but guess what? In Acts chapter 8, who you read about? In Acts chapter 8. It even says it right here. Philip and the Ethiopian. All right, this Ethiopian was no regular Cushite. All right, he was an Israelite who come from Ethiopia. Verse 26 is Acts 8 and 26. And the angel of the Lord spake unto Philip, saying, Arise, and go toward the south unto the way that goeth down from Jerusalem unto Gaza, which is desert. And he arose and went, and behold, a man of Ethiopia, a eunuch of great authority under Candace, queen of the Ethiopians, who had the charge of all her treasure and had come to Jerusalem for to worship. So why did he come up to Jerusalem? If he was an Ethiopian, why didn't he stay in Ethiopia to worship? It's because he was a Jew who just so happened to live in Ethiopia, who was dispersed into Ethiopia. All right, dispersed into Cush. That's why he was made a eunuch. All right, to be a servant and the authority of Candace, the queen of Ethiopians. All right, so this goes into how he was reading the Bible. All right, how did he get the Bible? Because he was a Jew. All right, the other nations didn't just have the Bible back then. All right, but anyway, from there, let's go into what's happening to these people and why. In Deuteronomy 28, Deuteronomy 28 is very pivotal when understanding not only Bible history, but world history and current events. Deuteronomy is very pivotal when understanding the scriptures in general. All right? In Deuteronomy 28, in verse 15, it says, But it shall come to pass, if thou wilt not hearken unto the voice of the Lord thy God, to observe to do all his commandments and his statutes, which I command thee this day, that all these curses shall come upon thee and overtake thee. So Moses was speaking to the Israelites, and he said, look, here's the covenant that we made with God. When we said we was going to do everything he said to do, he's going to bless us and put us above all nations, and we're going to rule the earth. But if we don't listen to him, all these bad things are going to happen to you. All right? So let's jump down to the point here. All right. Verse 25. The Lord shall cause thee to be smitten before thine enemies. I mean, you're going to die. Your enemies are going to come and kill you. Thou shalt go out one way against them and flee 7 ways before them. Right. So you might go out one way in a protest, but then you leave, you're scattered out because they come through and they either throw down a flash grenade, or they come through and they start attacking people, and people run in all sorts of different ways to get out of there, right? But also spiritually. People go back to their secular ideologies, their Christianity, their Islam, their, Judaism. People go back into all their different belief systems as well, all right? And shall be removed into all the kingdoms of the earth. That's how Jews ended up in Ethiopia in the first place. Not only through running there and migration, but also forcefully being taken there in slavery all throughout Africa. All right. If you read the history of Africa, you'll say, oh, that's Africans enslaving other Africans. That's not that simple. What it really is, it's simple, but it's not that simple. All right. It's a different type of simple. It's Hamites enslaving Israelites in a lot of cases. In some cases, the Israelites got one over on the Hamites and was enslaving them. But in a lot of cases, it was the Hamites being aggressive and being oppressive toward the Israelites. But even in this case of old Ahmed Abi, trying to please his constituents, I'm sure, by oppressing his own people. And he would set up the overseers of the people to do the same thing, to turn their backs on them, give them a high salary government job so that they would oppress their own people. All right? So from there, let's get Leviticus 26, because they say the same thing. They say the same thing. Leviticus 26. And really what this is very similar to is if you read the history of the Maccabees, you read how people like Jason, people like Menelaus would just side with the Greeks over their people and oppress their own people. That's what it's really similar to. Leviticus 26, and I suppose you could say it's similar to the Kings as well, where people would do that as well. But Leviticus 26 and verse 17. And I will set my face against you, and ye shall be slain before your enemies. They that hate you shall reign over you, and ye shall flee when none pursueth you. You see that right there? So you're going to be running. Just like I say, you see somebody get killed, and then you scatter. It's saying the same thing. It's saying the same exact thing. So, what's the solution? What's the solution? Because what we read about in Deuteronomy 28, we read about the curses. All right? We read about the curses. So, how can we come up out of these curses? In Galatians 3, Paul gives us the answer in the Spirit of Christ. Galatians 3 and verse, let's start with verse 10. We'll start with 10. For as many as are of the works of the law are under the curse. For as many as are of the works of the law are under the curse. For it is written, cursed is everyone that continueth not. Come on. Wait. You ain't got to go crazy. See, because they can't pull up the ad, they say the page was unresponsive. Get out of here. Get out of here with the ad. All right. For it is written, cursed is everyone that continueth not in all things which are written in the book of the law to do them. You see that right there? So, Paul said you're going to remain under the curse unless you come into Christ. Because none of us have been keeping the laws the way we need to do. But that no man is justified by the law in the sight of God. For it is evident, for the just shall live by faith. So Paul said, look, you can try all the works you want to, but without faith, your works are dead. All right? And the law is not of faith, but the man that doeth them shall live in them. Christ hath redeemed us from the curse of the law, being made a curse for us. Right? So, Christ come down to redeem us from the curses of the law. But guess what? He can't redeem us physically. He can't redeem us from our captivities until we follow in his works. All right, and do what he said to do. Man, let me get out of this. Maybe that'll help it. It keep popping that stuff up like I can't stay on the page with the scriptures if they can't pull an ad up. All right. Christ has redeemed us from the curse of the law, being made a curse for us, for it is written, cursed is everyone that hangeth on a tree. Right? So Christ was on the cross for us so that we could be redeemed. All right. Let's get another one. Let's get another one. Luke 1:68. Let's start with 68. This is what Christ came to do. People overlook this in the church because they don't believe what the Bible really says. They believe their traditions. They believe their doctrines. But this is what Zechariah said. This is the father of John the Baptist speaking in the Holy Ghost. And his father, Zechariah, was filled with the Holy Ghost and prophesied, saying, blessed be the Lord God of Israel, for he hath visited and redeemed his people, and hath raised up a horn of salvation for us in the house of his servant David, as he spake by the mouth of his holy prophets, which have been since the world began, that we should be saved from our enemies and from the hand of all that hate us. That's what Christ came to do. That's what Christ came to do, was to save us from the hand of our enemies and from the hands of all that hate us, to redeem us from all these places all over the world.